Are you ready? Last 2 chapters of Midnight Howl by Claire Hutton and published by Scholastic. Here we go. Chapter 21. Lily! Lily? Haley echoed. Marisol, you don't think Lily can't be a wolf? I was suddenly absolutely sure. There was a wolf in front of me, but I knew that it was my friend Lily. It wasn't just the crescent moon mark on its leg that matched Lily's birthmark, or the expression in its eyes that, now that I looked, seemed so familiar. The way the wolf stood watching us reminded me of Lily's steady calm. Wow, I said. No wonder she didn't want me talking about werewolves. The wolf pulled its lip back over her pointed teeth as if she was smiling, agreeing with me, or snarling and warning me. Another howl in the distance. Closer this time. The wolf bounded toward me and I flinched. She grabbed the hem of my jeans gently with her teeth without touching my skin and began tugging me back towards the house. Haley, I shouted, panicking. Lily dug harder on my pant leg. A second wolf's howl answered the first. They were coming closer. I think we better go, Marisol, Haley said, her voice shaking. I think we should do what she wants. Lily dropped my pant leg and pushed her head against me hard. Then she shoved Haley with her shoulder, pushing her back toward the house. Come on, Haley said, and started to run. I glanced back into the woods. Were the yellow eyes watching me from the distance? Wolf Lily, standing next to me, growled and pushed me again, and then took off running, her long lope quickly taking her out of the clearing. I ran after her. Branches hit my face, and I dropped the flashlight. I didn't stop to pick it up. I stumbled and tripped over the rocks and branches. Ahead of me, I could hear Haley's pounding feet as she ran. There was a thud as she fell, and I almost tripped over her. Come on, I said, pulling her up. Come on! We were both gasping for breath and staggering now. We held on to each other as we got close to the house. More howls erupted behind us. Were they on our trail? Suddenly, we were by the house again. The lights were still lit downstairs, and I fumbled for the doorknob, trying to be fast and quiet. Marisol, Haley said softly beside me. She was staring out of the little circle of light cast by the house's windows. I followed her eyes. In the shadows, just outside the light, stood the wolf. Lily? She growled softly, twitched her ears in an impatient way as if saying, What are you waiting for? Get inside now. Instead, Haley walked towards her. Haley, I said warningly. I was sure it was Lily and that she was helping us, but still, I didn't know just how much of her was just Lily right now and how much was a wolf. I didn't think it was a good idea to get too close to her if we could help it. Haley just kept going until she reached Lily. Then she knelt on the ground in front of her. Lily, Haley said hesitantly, and held out her hand like she might to a dog. Lily, thank you, she said. The wolf sniffed her hand briefly, straight-legged and dignified, and then, very briefly, dropped her head before turning, like a bow, and disappearing quickly and quietly back into the forest. Wow, said Haley a few minutes later. Just wow, she shook her head. I can't believe this. We managed to slip back into the house and upstairs without anybody seeing us. I had half expected her parents to either be out searching for us or waiting by the door to ground us forever. But everything was quiet. Haley and I were still sitting on her bed, totally shocked. I would have never guessed, said Haley. Lily? Wow, Lily is like the most normal person I know. I thought for a long time before I said anything. Listen, Haley, we can't tell anyone about this. She looked at me seriously. I know, we can't. And who would believe us anyway? She said. Well, I paused. Anderson would. He's staking out the gym teacher's house right now to see if he turns into a monster. Haley giggled. Anderson, did I ever tell you how in 4th grade he convinced me that I had psychic powers? He had a bunch of us trying to start campfires with our minds. He'll believe anything. I know, I laughed. Haley sat straight. Can you imagine how Lily must be feeling, though? We have to do something. Like what? I said. Make her a "It's okay, you're a werewolf" card, or take an oath of silence. Haley shrugged. She probably is hoping we don't really know. A drawn-out howl rose outside in the distance. I shivered. Do you think it's her? Haley sighed. Do you know what? She asked. I think it must be really lonely to have such a big secret. I nodded and leaned back against the wall behind Haley's bed outside. Outside, the full moon sailed high in the sky. I thought about Lily. Smart, capable, scientific Lily, and the huge secret she was keeping. I felt so sad for her. I had Tasha and now Haley, but how could Lily ever really be close to anyone? She had to keep so much of herself hidden. Could Haley and I help her now that we knew the truth? Chapter 22, last chapter. How we do. The next day, even though it seemed like the world had changed forever, we still had to get up and go to school. Haley looked as sleepy as I felt over breakfast, and we barely spoke at the bus stop or on the bus. What's the matter with you? Jack finally asked, exasperated, as we headed for the front doors of the school. He had been trying to talk to us about school, the TV show he watched the night before, cooking, all sorts of stuff, and Haley and I had barely spoken a word. Sorry, I said. I guess we're both tired. Haley nodded in agreement. Jack looked at us suspiciously. Okay, he said. Jack wasn't nosy, and I added that to the mental list of things I liked about him. All morning I looked for Lily. I kept thinking I'd seen her, but it would just be a flash of honey-colored hair as someone whipped around a corner, or a glimpse of a straight-backed figure walking quietly along in a crowd. Have you seen Lily? I asked Bonnie when I ran into her near my locker. She said casually, fiddling with her blanket. What about her? I said. I guess I'm looking for her. I haven't seen her today. Bonnie said. I'll tell her if I see her. She brightened. Marisol, I had the most amazing time last night. Yeah, I said, interested despite everything else that's going on. With Anderson. Her eyes widened. I only went with him because he's cute and when he gets all excited about something. But I think he might be right about Mr. Bonley, she said. Bonley's house is dark and spooky, and he went out really early and didn't come back before we had to go. We walked around the building, and there were these weird paw prints, like a big dog's in the backyard, and we think they might be a wolves. I wanted to ask if she was sure Mr. Bonley didn't have a pet dog, but then I remembered the howling in the woods last night and changed my mind. I now knew that Lily was a werewolf, and it seemed pretty unlikely that she was the only one. Who was I to say Mr. Bonley wasn't one too? It was a scary thought because Lily had definitely been afraid for us last night. And when a wolf is scared, there is something to be seriously scared about. Maybe the other werewolves weren't so gentle. Just be careful, I said to Bonnie. If you guys are right, he might be dangerous, especially with a secret like that. She nodded seriously. Yeah, and even if he's not a werewolf, he is kind of a mean gym teacher, she said. I don't want to get caught sneaking around his backyard. He'd probably make me do twice as many push-ups in gym class for the rest of my days in middle school. She grinned. Don't worry. I can keep Anderson under control. By noon, I was sure that Lily was avoiding me. I wondered whether I'd see her at lunch, but when I entered the cafeteria, Lily was sitting at our regular table with Amber. She sat up straighter when she saw Haley and me come into the cafeteria. She looked brave and wary, a soldier in an enemy territory. Hi, we all said, and there was a little pause. Then Amber tightened her ponytail and said, I don't know if you guys have been thinking about the student council bake sale at all, but we're raising money for a winter dance. The student council is asking everyone to bake goodies for it, and of course, to buy stuff. Jack's making brownies, but can you cook, Marisol? Or you, Haley? The more the better. She knows I set things on fire to make toast, said Lily, giving a strained-looking smile. But I promised to buy at least 3 things. Amber frowned. Lily, that's not funny. You could have burned down your house. She got out the notebook and looked expectantly at me. Is there some kind of Texas thing you'd like to make? We talked about the bake sale and things felt easier. I had to promise to make the cactus-shaped cookies and also convince Amber that Texas toast is just garlic bread and not a regional toast everyone would love to try. Just as I was relaxing, Amber zipped her notebook and pen back into her backpack. Where are you going? Lily asked anxiously. I've got a field hockey meeting, Amber said. We're going to watch the tapes from our last game and talk strategy. See you later. After she left, we sat in silence for a while. Haley then cleared her throat. So, she said, how was your night? Fine, Lily said tightly. Yeah, said Haley. It was quiet for us. I went to bed early and slept like a rock. She looked at me meaningfully. How about you, Marisol? I caught on. Me too, I said. I don't even remember dreaming. Lily looked down at her lap. Mm-hmm, she said. I do wonder, though, Lily said casually. You know, Anderson's been talking about werewolves a lot. He thinks Mr. Bonnelly is one. What do you think, Haley? Haley hesitated. There's no such thing as werewolves, she said determinedly. Then her face softened a little. If there were, though, I'd bet they'd just be a couple of families. Maybe people who have been here a long time and who want to be left alone. Oh, I said. So you don't think people get to be werewolves by being bitten or maybe drinking water out of a wolf's paw print? They both stared at me for a while, then giggled. Lily shook her head. Probably not, she sighed. I would think, though, that it would be a secret that people would do anything to protect. It might not be safe for other people to know about it. Haley nodded, and I nodded in agreement. Right, said Haley. You know, I used to go out at night looking for wolves, but I don't want to anymore. She looked seriously into Lily's eyes. Lily, she said, you know my family's lived here for a long time. Lily raised her eyebrows. Mine too. Well, I've always been ashamed of some things my ancestors did. They, treated other people unfairly. The stories about that made me think that people were a lot worse than animals. Haley hesitated. I've always wanted to make it better somehow. I thought about the townsfolk who had driven out their neighbors. Molly had said her family had been part of that story, but she hadn't said which part. I'd gotten it all wrong. They hadn't been the werewolves, but the frightened people who burned down their neighbors' houses and chased them out of town. Lily and Haley exchanged a long look. Sometimes having friends who support you is a big deal, Lily said. You know, on another totally unrelated note, I wanted to tell you both that even though I haven't been here that long, I feel like we're becoming really good friends, I added. And if one of my friends ever happened to have a secret, I would never ever tell anyone. Me either, said Haley. That's how friends are. Lily looked up and gave us a weak smile. Her eyes were glistening. She looked as though she might start to cry. On the other hand, Haley said casually, if a friend wanted to talk about anything, it's really important to listen and not repeat anything ever. I think that's true, I agreed. Lily's mouth trembled. Just generally speaking, it can be good to talk, she said in a soft voice. My family can be tough to talk about some things. She hesitated. They have a particular point of view that's maybe a bit different than the point of view of a friend might have, if you see what I mean. Then she gave us a real smile, and Haley and I smiled back. It was like we were in this warm little circle of friendships and secrets just between the three of us. I thought about each of them and about Bonnie and Amber and Jack too, and horses and the mountains and the big Montana sky overhead. Haley sighed. I'm gonna miss you, Marisol, she said. Things have changed a lot for me since you've been here. Yeah, said Lily. I feel like we just started being really good friends. I cleared my throat. My mom and I had been talking about whether we should extend our stay, and I'd been going back and forth. I missed home, but I really loved Wolf Valley too. And I felt so close to Haley and Lily after our adventure the previous night. You know, I said, my mom would stay the rest of the school year if I wanted to. Really? Said Lily. My parents are dying for you guys to stay, Haley said. Me and Jack too. I grinned at my new friends. It's only October, I said. I can't wait to see what happens in this town the rest of the year. I would have to explain to Tasha and reassure her that she'd always be my best friend, even if she didn't see me until summer. I knew she'd miss me and I'd miss her too, but I was just starting to understand life in Wolf Valley, and as a scientist, I was sure there was a lot more to find out about this little town. My mom had been right. So far, my time in Montana had been a great adventure, and I had a feeling it wasn't over just yet. The end! And that was Midnight Howl! Later.